It's Martin Luther King Day here in the States, but many dishonor Dr. King's memory while invoking his name. Now, today here in the United States is a pretty significant federal holiday, Martin Luther King Day. Most banks are closed, courthouses, government offices. It's as big a federal holiday as any other. And rightfully so. Dr. King did great things for many people, which led to the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which essentially integrated the United States and gave equality to Black Americans. The only good things came from that. But sadly, many groups claim to emulate Dr. King while doing anything but. Let's look at Black Lives Matter. You see these Black Lives Matter rallies. People are wearing Martin Luther King t-shirts. But at the same time, they're chanting, "What do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them? Now." Or they're chanting, "Pigs in a blanket. Fry them like bacon." Or they're throwing Molotov cocktails into their local CVS in their own neighborhood, burning down the stores that service them. That's not something Martin Luther King would have done. In fact, I think he would be disgusted if he saw what was being done in his name. You know, I used to see this when I was a New York City cop. I'll never forget I arrested a guy after he had beaten up an elderly couple. These people were elderly, 80s, late 70s, maybe early to mid 80s, bruised and battered, and he wanted to steal their Social Security. And these were very poor people who lived on a fixed income. That check was the difference between having food and medicine or no food and medicine. Beat him up without a care in the world. He terrorized old people in the neighborhood. Many of these guys did back then in that area. And I arrested him. And I put the cuffs on a little too tight because he needed that. And you know what he did? He screamed about his civil rights. He invoked Dr. Martin Luther King. I'll never forget it. Now, he didn't care much about Dr. King's teachings of peace and civility and being law-abiding when he was beating an elderly Black couple to steal their money. No. At that point, Dr. King didn't matter. But when the handcuffs were on him and he was in a little bit of pain from the metal biting into his wrist, all of a sudden, he remembered every word of Martin Luther King. And that's the hypocrisy. When a group like Black Lives Matter burns down a CVS or screams and chants for dead cops, they're doing everything Martin Luther King was against. Look, did Martin Luther King break some laws to achieve his objective? Yeah, but minor nonsense, like sitting in a diner he wasn't supposed to be in, or blocking a street, or his followers refusing to get off a bus. They weren't putting anybody's lives at risk. They weren't hurting anybody. They were disorderly conduct type crimes, things today that are violations in many states. They're adjudicated at the same level as a speeding ticket. These are not crimes against humanity or violent offenses that require incarceration. And so he needed to make his point, and sometimes he would push the line a little bit into violations. But he never burned down his local drugstore, whatever the CVS back in the 1950s and 60s was. He never chanted for dead police officers. But what's even worse is the Democratic Party's abandonment of what Dr. King preached, right? Because think about Dr. King as a person. I like to microanalyze. When Dr. King presented himself, he was this charismatic, eloquent, articulate guy. He wore a suit. You've never seen a photo of him, maybe in some candid shots, but he was always in a dress shirt. Maybe the sleeves were rolled up to here. He understood that the way you present yourself is how you're perceived, right? I'm on air, and I wear my T-shirts, and I like to bring you a show that's a little more pop culture-ish in nature. But if I have to do a meeting after this show, I'm going to put on a suit. I'm going to dress appropriately for the environment I'm in, right? And Dr. King understood that. So I'm sure when he was home with his family, if they were at a swimming pool, he on a bathing suit and a T-shirt. But when he was in public, on camera, he would put on a suit. And it was the appropriate thing to do, meeting with politicians and community leaders. Unfortunately, that hasn't trickled down to many young Black men today. They think it's acceptable to go into a job interview with their pants hanging halfway down their legs, gold teeth stuck in their mouth, sounding like they just came out of prison. I saw it when I worked the streets. I hear it from many of my colleagues that when they try to hire somebody, they're like, wow, this guy was a pretty good candidate, but the image he portrays, I could never, I just couldn't put him out there in front of clients. He would destroy my company. Now, that's not racist. That's not racist. That's just good business. We see it in the Democrats then condemning that same employer, calling it racist. We also see it in the Democrats needing to keep Black Americans on the public dole. One of the other things that Dr. King preached was self-reliance, self-preservation. individual battles. Fight your own civil rights battle every day. That's not what today's Democratic Party wants to hear. But it shouldn't surprise you, because the Democrats fought the Civil Rights Act tooth and nail. The Democrats created the Ku Klux Klan. The Democrats are the ones who came up with the concept of gun control. Pre-1934, before the National Firearms Act, you could buy fully automatic weapons in hardware stores. The Democrats were a driving force behind all of these draconian gun control regulations because they wanted to disarm blacks in the South. That's how bad it is. That's how skewed the narrative is. Robert Byrd, a decades-long Democratic senator, somebody they called the conscience of the Senate, was a longtime Klansman and Ku Klux Klan leader. The conscience of the Senate. Could you imagine a Republican who was a senior leader in the Ku Klux Klan ever being called the conscience of the Senate? Never. But the Democrats did. They got away with it. They did it and they got away with it. And they want to keep black Americans really on a political plantation. I mean, what's more racist than Democrats telling black Americans, post Martin Luther King's work, you'll never be better, so you need our entitlements. You're too incompetent to get an ID to vote. Don't worry, we'll take care of that. These big bad Republicans want to reduce taxes for the wealthy. What they don't tell them is the wealthy reinvest that money and they create jobs. They may own businesses and open businesses in this neighborhood. They don't tell them that. What they tell them is when those businesses come in, burn them to the ground. You've been done wrong. How tragically racist is that? And this trickles down to other groups. So here in South Florida, we have this moronic phenomenon every year. The hashtag is Wheels Up, Guns Down, and it's supposedly to honor Dr. Martin Luther King, and it's done every year on Martin Luther King Day. And basically, young black men who get on off-road ATVs and dirt bikes and ride around, they basically engage in mobile riots all over South Florida, and they ride around like maniacs. They're 27 times more likely to be killed on these bikes. 2 were killed last year than they would be if they were driving in a regular motor vehicle, and slightly more likely to be killed than if they were just riding their bike normally fast. And they go out there and they supposedly do this to honor Dr. Martin Luther King. Now, one day, one of these idiots is going to tell me how you honor a civil rights icon by putting thousands of commuters, children on school buses, elderly people driving to the grocery store or the doctor, how you honor Dr. Martin Luther King by putting their lives at risk on the road. One day someone will tell me that. One day someone will tell me why Black Lives Matter members wear Dr. King t-shirts while burning down their local CVS or chanting for dead cops, or why the guy I arrested could beat an elderly black couple and never give Martin Luther King a second thought. But the minute the cuffs were too tight, all of a sudden he remembered every one of his speeches word for word and every one of his policies. And I really do blame this on progressive identity politics. I blame this on liberals needing to keep people of color down and under their thumb. Look at what they're doing with Puerto Rican refugees to the United States post-Hurricane Irma. They're basically sending buses to the ports where they're coming in, the airports and the seaports. We're seeing this in Florida. I'm getting reports from political operatives on the ground and registering them to vote Democrat. Now, why would these people vote Democrat when Democrats destroyed the infrastructure on their island? When Democrats took $20 billion that was supposed to go to infrastructure and wasted it? Nobody even knows where that money went. Their island is uninhabitable because of Democrat policies. Yet they're coming here and Democrats are registering them to vote. Their island is uninhabitable, like Detroit, like parts of Chicago, like parts of Baltimore, like parts of St. Louis, like parts of Houston, like parts of New York City, like parts of Los Angeles, because of Democratic policies. Policies designed to keep people of color down and under the thumb of the Democratic Party. And like I said, what is more racist than telling someone you'll never succeed on your own, you need government? And it's only because of the color of your skin. You will never do better than you are right now. Never be better than you are right now. Never have more than you have right now because of the color of your skin. So you need us, government, and the Democratic Party. Is there anything more racist and cruel than that? I don't think so. But the Republicans do a terrible job of outreach to communities of color. And it's really sad because if Republicans dug into Dr. Martin Luther King's speeches and they used his sound bites, and Coretta Scott King, one of his relatives, is is pretty vocal. She's been a pretty good advocate for conservative causes. She has not been a staunch ally of the Democrats. Because if you look into his writings and you look into his ideology and his doctrine, it's about things that are very conservative in nature. Respectability, personal responsibility, entrepreneurship, education, all of the things the liberals despise unless they can control. They love education because their teachers' unions make a lot of money, but really their version of education is progressive indoctrination. It has very little to do with actual, unbiased, objective education. And I really wish conservatives in the United States would take more from Dr. Martin Luther King, and this is such a good day to talk about it and do this segment, because if they took those sound bites and they used those as part of their outreach to the Black community, the Hispanic community, we might see a sea change in the complexion of voters migrating off of the Democrat plantation into the conservative arena, where they'll be rewarded for their efforts, for their ingenuity, for their intellect, for their intelligence. It doesn't matter where you come from. Dr. Ben Carson grew up very, very poor. He's a very wealthy man today, having been a very successful surgeon, making a lot of money, and now he's a cabinet-level secretary in the United States government. He grew up in a poor Black family. His mom couldn't read. She didn't let him know that because she knew that he had to believe he was just like everybody else to succeed. Self-esteem has a lot to do with it, and the Democrats are about the best at crushing the self-esteem of young Blacks. That's why young Black men kill and are killed at rates 22 times their representation in the population. Not just a public safety emergency, a public health epidemic. I think that would make Dr. King's head spin if he saw what Democrats have done to the Black community. But really, it's incumbent upon me, it's incumbent on all of us with a voice, even you, the audience, when you're talking to your friends. Let's take some of the teachings of Dr. King and use them to recruit people over to the light, to the conservative movement, because it's pretty clear. Democratic policies really do nothing other than to keep people down. And if certain groups in America are kept suppressed, well, as a nation, we all suffer. If you like this content as much as I enjoy bringing it to you, please subscribe to our premium service at www.therebel.media/shows. And don't forget to catch my new show, Off the Cuff Declassified, a full hour of this content and so much more. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you tomorrow.